April 2005. A cramped office in Helsinki glows under the harsh light of a single desk lamp while the rest of the city sleeps. Linus Torvalds sits hunched over a keyboard, a 35-year-old engineer hammering out code at 2 in the morning, unaware that the lines appearing on his screen will soon govern the heartbeat of modern software. You've pushed commits. You've opened pull requests. You've battled merge conflicts. You think you know Git, but the truth hides beneath the familiar commands you type every day. Git wasn't a tidy engineering project. It erupted from crisis, from betrayal, from a countdown that left no room for hesitation. And the stakes weren't theoretical. The code running your smartphone depends on Git. The systems flying Boeing's jets rely on it. The AI models shaping your daily life are trained, tuned, and tracked through Git repositories. This tool isn't an accessory. It's the invisible architecture of trust, the operating system for collaboration itself. The story begins long before that night in Helsinki. From a student hacking on a 386DX in 1991, to a global volunteer army sending patches from every time zone, to a meltdown so severe it nearly tore apart the world's biggest open-source project. Git emerged from disaster, and in doing so, it reshaped the power structure of computing forever. This is the story of how a 10-day scramble rewrote the rules of software. Chapter 1. When Linux outgrew its tools. Have you ever wondered how a hobby project written on a dusty beige PC in 1991 exploded into the most influential software collaboration in history? What happens when a system built for a few enthusiastic hackers suddenly becomes the backbone of an entire planet's computing? Rewind to 1991 at the University of Helsinki. Linus Torvalds, brilliant and blunt, sits at a 386DX machine, assembling an operating system just for fun, never imagining it will attract tens of thousands of contributors within a decade. By the early 2000s, that volunteer army stretches across continents. Patches flood in at all hours. Email threads balloon into chaos. Andrew Morton, soft-spoken and patient, spends nights stitching together code, like a diplomat trying to hold a fracturing nation together. And the pressure keeps rising. By 2002, Linux has more than 8,000 contributors and tens of thousands of patches per release cycle. The workflow resembles architects tossing blueprints across oceans, hoping the pieces line up when they land. They rarely do. Regressions appear. Releases stall. The fear grows that fragmentation, or worse, a corporate takeover, could splinter the project that powers everything from servers to spacecraft. Then a new figure steps into the frame. Larry McVoy, charismatic and combative, offers a lifeline. A tool faster than anything the open source world has ever touched. A tool that promises order. A tool that comes with strings. And in the chaos of those years, those strings start to look like salvation. But salvation always comes with a price. Chapter 2. BitKeeper and the Price of Speed. For a brief moment in the early 2000s, the tool rescuing the world's largest open source project didn't believe in open source at all. It's the kind of twist that feels impossible until you meet the man behind it. Larry McVoy grows up in California's tech trenches, bouncing between Sun Microsystems and startup battlegrounds, fueled by a conviction that great engineering deserves a price tag. He's charismatic, he's sharp, he's confrontational, and he's built something extraordinary. BitKeeper, a distributed version control system years ahead of everything else on the market. A seat can cost up to $1,000, closer to $1,500 in today's money. But McVoy sees it as the future. Then he does something no one expects. He offers BitKeeper to Linux developers for free, with conditions. Linus Torvalds, exhausted from years of patch chaos, sees a lifeline. He accepts. Immediately, a fracture opens. Some developers celebrate the speed. Others recoil, calling it a moral compromise, a betrayal of open source principles. But the results speak loudly. By 2002, Linux development accelerates by 30 to 40%. Conflicts drop. Releases stabilize. BitKeeper becomes the backbone of the most important open source project on Earth. And that backbone is proprietary. Everyone feels the tension tightening, because in every deal with strings, someone eventually pulls the string. And the moment that string snaps is closer than anyone realizes. Chapter 3. Accusations, Suspicion, and the Collapse. Remember that uneasy tension hanging over BitKeeper? The sense that Linux depended on a tool built on conditions that could shift at any moment? That tension is about to snap, and when it does, It detonates like a fault line giving way beneath a city. April 2005. An email lands in Larry McVoy's inbox. The message seems small at first, but it carries a spark hot enough to ignite a firestorm across the entire open-source world. Andrew Tridgell, soft-spoken, brilliant, the gentle genius behind Samba, has begun reverse engineering BitKeeper. Not to steal it, not to sabotage it. He wants interoperability, a bridge between worlds. But McVoy sees something else entirely. A threat to his business. A violation of trust. A direct attack. Accusations explode across mailing lists. Developers choose sides. Old grievances resurface. The debates turn personal, sharp, unfiltered. And then McVoy makes the one move no one believed he'd ever make. He revokes Linux's free BitKeeper license. Overnight, the world's largest open-source project loses its central tool. Development stalls. Thousands of contributors freeze mid-workflow. Release schedules implode. Servers wait for patches that never arrive. It's a standstill with global consequences, and every finger points toward the same person. Linus Torvalds. He faces a leadership crisis with no roadmap, no replacement, no time. The whole ecosystem holds its breath, watching the project drift toward paralysis. So Linus does what Linus always does when the stakes hit their limit. He opens an editor, sets his jaw, and starts writing code. Because there is no alternative now, only the countdown that comes next. Chapter 4. The birth of Git. The clock starts ticking before anyone even realizes it. April 3rd, 2005. Linux development has slammed into a wall. The community panics. And in a quiet room in Portland, Linus Torvalds launches into one of the most intense coding frenzies of his life. No committees, no debates, no safety net. Just a crisis, a keyboard, and a deadline measured in hours, not weeks. Torvalds thrives in moments like this. He once rewrote Linux's scheduler over a single weekend because the old one felt wrong. Now the stakes are far higher. He needs a replacement for BitKeeper, a system fast enough to handle thousands of patches, durable enough to preserve the trust of a global army, and simple enough to bootstrap from scratch. So he makes a radical choice. Instead of tracking changes the traditional way, Git captures snapshots, photos of the entire project at a moment in time. No long paper trails, no fragile deltas, just snapshots, immutable and lightning fast. Early prototypes commit in under 0.2 seconds. Branching takes milliseconds. Other systems choke. Git accelerates. By April 7-96, hours in, something usable appears. Rough, barely documented, brutally fast, and the countdown keeps running. If Git fails, Linux halts. If Git holds, it transforms version control forever. But raw speed isn't enough. New ideas need champions, battles, and believers. And the first battle is already forming on the horizon. Chapter 5. Git versus the establishment. 3. That's how many seconds it takes in 2006 for a typical Subversion checkout at Google to process a small project. 100,000. That's the number of repositories Apache manages under SVN. And 0, that's how many developers outside the Linux kernel believe Git will ever replace the systems they already trust. Because in the beginning, almost everyone hates Git. Martin Poole and the Bazaar team at Canonical argue their tool is cleaner, friendlier, easier to learn. Brian Fitzpatrick and Ben Collins Sussman defend Subversion as the sane, civilized choice, powering giants like Google and Apache. And standing quietly in the middle of the storm is Junio Hamano, methodical and unshakable, the engineer who will soon take Git's rough edges and sharpen them into a weapon. The problem is simple. Git feels hostile. Commands look cryptic. The staging area, instead of acting like a save button, behaves more like a control room with levers, switches, and hidden doors. Meanwhile, Mercurial gains momentum. Mozilla nearly chooses it as their official DVCS. Developers wonder why Git insists on doing everything differently. Flame wars erupt. Conferences turn into ideological battlegrounds. Git is fast, but critics call it unapproachable. SVN is stable. Mercurial elegant. Bazaar easy. Then one company makes a decision no one sees coming. A decision that will tilt the industry, redraw loyalties, and push Git from rebellion to dominance. Because the moment Git meets the right platform, everything changes. Chapter 6. GitHub enters. Tom Preston Werner is standing in a cramped San Francisco apartment in 2008, staring at a prototype he's cobbled together with equal parts ambition and frustration. He isn't trying to fix Git. He's trying to fix how people use Git. And in this moment, surrounded by half-empty coffee cups and the hum of an old MacBook, he's about to rewrite the fate of version control without fully realizing it. Tom is the visionary. Chris Wanstrath is the quiet implementer. PJ Hyatt fills in the gaps with relentless execution. Together they build GitHub, a site that doesn't sell Git's speed or its cryptic power. It sells something far more explosive: social coding. Forking becomes a compliment. Pull requests become conversations. Collaboration becomes visible, shareable, addictive. Their pricing starts at $7, $12, and $22 per month. Numbers small enough to feel like an experiment, but the response is anything but small. By mid-2009, GitHub hits 100,000 users. By 2011, it reaches 1 million. Rails moves. Node.js moves. Startups migrate by the thousands. SVN collapses under the weight of its rigidity. Mercurial fades as momentum drains from its community. Git doesn't win because it's fast anymore. It wins because GitHub makes contribution effortless, public, and rewarding. The next generation chooses Git the way birds choose the sky. But dominance invites new pressure scaling problems, corporate politics, and questions about who controls the world's open source infrastructure. And as Git ascends from rebellion to empire, the stakes rise again. Chapter 7. Git takes over the world. Fast forward to 2024. GitHub servers hum inside climate-controlled data centers across the globe, storing more than 300 million repositories that define the software running your phone, your bank, your job, your world. The rebellion that began with a frantic 10-day coding sprint has become the beating heart of modern computing. But its rise comes with consequences no one predicted. Junio Hamano, quiet and steady, now serves as Git's guardian. Since 2005, he's shaped its evolution with monk-like discipline, reviewing patches, refining edge cases, and guiding a tool used by millions. Major companies, Fortune 500 giants with billion-dollar code bases, depend on Git's branching, merging, and snapshot engine to coordinate global engineering teams. AI researchers use it to track model experiments and dataset changes, turning Git into the ledger of machine learning progress. But empire creates new struggles. Mono repos swell to impossible sizes. A single clone can take 45 minutes at a Fortune 50 company. Teams clash over code review rules, permissions, ownership. Open source maintainers worry about the gravitational pull of corporate platforms. Git was built for the chaos of 2005, not the planetary scale workflows of 2024. And the world keeps accelerating. Real-time collaboration, massive models, AI-generated code. The pressures on version control multiply faster than Git can evolve. Some engineers are already asking the dangerous question no one asked in 2005. What comes after Git? The next battle is about to begin. Chapter 8. What comes after Git? Fast forward to 2022. Inside a cavernous engineering building at a Fortune 50 headquarters, a developer stares at a terminal as a Git clone crawls forward. Minute after minute. 45 minutes pass before the command completes. And this isn't a mistake. It's normal. The cost of scale has finally come due. Git, the tool born from a 10-day crisis, now faces pressures unimaginable in 2005. Facebook's engineering teams wrestle with monorepos so huge, they bend Git to its breaking point. Google sidesteps the problem entirely with Piper, a custom system designed for planetary scale development. Meanwhile, startup founders chase something different: real-time collaboration powered by CRDTs, tools where edits merge themselves and conflicts dissolve before they form. The ground is shifting again. Real-time coding sessions push the limits of Git's snapshot model. AI systems generate entire code bases in seconds, demanding version control that reacts instantly. Massive repositories balloon past what cloning, branching, and merging were designed for. The old guard feels slow, heavy, out of step with the world it helped create. And beneath these pressures sits the same fear that haunted Linux in 2005. Whoever invents the next leap in version control could tilt the balance of power across the entire software universe. Individuals reclaim control, or corporations tighten their grip. The future is wide open, turbulent, and unresolved. And as the next revolution brews beneath the surface, the story arcs back to where it began. One frustrated developer, ready to rewrite the rules. Chapter 9. the hidden architecture of collaboration. From that cramped Helsinki office in 2005 to the global, interconnected engineering systems of today, the journey of Git stretches across revolutions in hardware, software, and human coordination. A tool born from a meltdown became the quiet backbone of modern creativity, shaping everything from open-source communities to trillion-dollar corporations. You can see its fingerprints everywhere. At OpenAI, teams track model weights, datasets, and training runs through Git-based workflows that coordinate experiments spread across continents. Meta manages sprawling AI research pipelines the same way. Independent researchers publish reproducible code with a single push. Git isn't background infrastructure anymore. It's the connective tissue linking the entire ecosystem of modern innovation. The scale is staggering. Hundreds of millions of repositories, billions of commits, countless merges that quietly resolve the world's software conflicts every minute. It's the nervous system of our digital civilization, routing decisions, revisions, and ideas at a planetary level. But the future presses forward. AI-assisted development accelerates. Real-time collaboration grows. New systems challenge the limits of snapshots, branches, and clones. The next revolution, whether CRDTs, AI-native version control, or something nobody has named yet, waits for the same spark that birthed Git: frustration colliding with ambition. Yet the core question never changes. How do we coordinate people, ideas, and decisions at scale? How do we track change in a world that changes faster every year? These challenges aren't technical. They're human. Git didn't just reshape how we code. It reshaped how we think about trust, collaboration, and creativity itself. And the next revolution in software will begin the same way Git did, with someone, somewhere, fed up enough to rewrite the rules.